Hello, I'm Vicki Hogarth. Nadine Pequeneza's award-winning film, The Last of the Right Whales, is getting its theatrical release on World Whale Day, February 20th. Let's take a look.
It's not the well-known whale. It's not the whale of Moby Dick, and it's not the humpback whale.
We have a very limited view on right whales. They're so rare, we don't understand them. And their decline tells us what is happening to this ocean.
1, then 2, then 6 dead whales, and the death count hasn't stopped.
With only hundreds left in existence, they've suffered a terrible blow.
We're at a crisis moment here.
The baseline of this ecosystem is changing. If the whales lose the plankton, they're dead.
So we're trying to look for layers of food to explain why the whale is feeding right close to the surface.
2 meters!
The real culprit in this is rope.
Once you have a vertical line and a whale in the same area, there's a risk.
So those are previous entanglement scars, previous boat strike scar.
And so we're causing all this. So we have to do something. If this happened to a human, what would we do?
Oh my goodness! Stop right here, there's one right next to us. This is the sort of stuff I live for.
How lucky are we, guys?
How important are these animals to us? That's really what this comes down to.
Oh my God.
Doesn't get much closer than that. This is one of the greatest animal ethical issues of our time.
We should leave no trace, and the traces that we do leave should be good ones.
Give nature a chance and it'll come right back. That's what we're asking for, is to give the right whale a chance to show what it's made of.
Joining me today is the director of The Last of the Right Whales, Nadine Pequeneza. So Nadine, congratulations on the early success of The Last of the Right Whales. It's an incredible film, and I've already had the chance to see it.
That's fantastic. I'm glad you did, and I understand you're moderating our panel in Moncton, so thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I am looking forward to it very much. Can you tell me what brought you to the subject matter? I know you've said you've always wanted to make a difference with the films that you make. You've done that with the criminal justice reform film 15 to Life. What brought you to the subject of the right whales, and what difference do you hope to make with this film?
It was the events of 2017. You know, we all know there were a large number of whales, 17 that died that year, and 12 of them in Canadian waters. So when that news started coming out, it was in such a short space of time, it really got my attention. And when we found out that those deaths are being caused by us, you know, by ship strikes and fishing gear entanglement, these whales don't normally die of a natural death anymore. And that's quite a statement if you stop to think about it. And I don't think we want to be responsible for wiping out a great whale that's been on this planet for millions of years because of ignorance and an unwillingness to do anything.
For people who don't know, approximately how many North Atlantic right whales are left in the world? And with that in mind, how challenging was it as a filmmaker to find them, to locate them, just for filming purposes?
Yeah, when we started making the film, there were about 411 right whales left. So that was in 2019. And now there's 336. So that tells you how urgent the situation is. And it is difficult to find a few hundred whales in an ocean. You know, their range is all the way from Florida to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So that's a lot of ground to cover. Luckily, there's aerial surveillance and a lot of boat surveillance as well. And even from shore, you know, some of the people that we film with in the documentary are citizen scientists who in Florida are helping the groups like NOAA and FWC, other conservation agencies with governments locate newborn calves. So there's a lot of people with eyes on the ocean, which really helped us to locate the whales and do the filming that we did, and all under federal permits, because these whales are protected because they're critically endangered. They have to have a protective bubble around them. You're not allowed to approach within 100 meters in Canada, 500 yards in the United States. And so we had to seek out those permits in order to get the footage that you see in the film.
Sadly, it's obviously easier to find them when they're either dead or entangled, but that obviously was such an important part of the film that you made. Why was it important to you to show those images and to have some focus on a large amount of focus on that part of the story?
Yeah, well, it's hard footage to watch, you know. And Nick Hawkins, who's from Fredericton, New Brunswick, he's the cinematographer and photographer that we follow in the film. His quest was to get underwater footage of the whales socializing, things that had never been seen before. But, you know, his quest started with documenting a necropsy. Actually, two. We documented Wolverine's necropsy and then punctuation. And it's difficult. It was difficult for him during those scenes, and it's the attachment that the people in the film have formed with these whales. They know them as individuals. You know, they have names. I just mentioned two of them. They're all cataloged with numbers in the North Atlantic right whale catalog, so they really know them as individuals. And I thought it was important for the audience to come to know the whales that way as well. And so one of the mom-calf pairs that we follow over the course of the 2.5 years of production, Snow Cone and her first calf, is really, we never could have predicted what happened to them, but it's symbolic of what's happening to the entire species. And so I'm hoping that, you know, by focusing on them, that the audience can connect with them in the same way that Nick and the other people in the film have connected with these whales.
Snow Cone, you mentioned, is one of the stars of the film. What does Snow Cone's struggle and life story, how is that emblematic, not just of the plight of the North Atlantic right whale, but of some of the ethical dilemmas faced by humans now in how we move forward?
Yeah, so Snow Cone is 15 when she had her first calf. And so we were with those citizen scientists that I mentioned who were observing from shore when they spotted her. And so that elation, you know, it was actually their first, everyone in that group was new to this citizen scientist project, which is called the Marineland Right Whale Project. So they were elated to see this whale, and they actually spotted Snow Cone and her calf several times because she's a whale that likes to hang out close to shore, you know, within a mile or so. And so they really connected with her. And then the two of them took off and went into the Gulf of Mexico, which is highly unusual for right whales. They usually don't go past Cape Canaveral. And so they had interactions, you know, with recreational fishers over on that side and connected. So the film is all, their story is about people connecting with them. And then, you know, Snow Cone's calf is killed within 8 months of being born. And later the mother is found entangled. And so those are the two key threats facing North Atlantic right whales. And to have that happen with a mom-calf pair that we follow and that people become really connected to, I think is a good way for the audience to be able to enter this story and understand the gravity of the situation facing right whales. And also to feel impacted by it in a very personal way, because you can't help but connect with these animals, especially when you see that attachment that happens between a mom and a calf. It's incredible to watch. They'll spend hours at the surface. You know, it can be 7 hours a day, almost in constant contact. And it certainly looks like play. The calves are just figuring out, you know, how to use their flukes, what they can do with their pecs. And so they've got these sort of half lob tails going on, you know, they're just experimenting like you would see a child learning to walk. It's incredible to watch.
Fishermen also factor into the story you told, ones that are involved in whale rescue teams, as well as experimenting with ropeless fishing. Why was it important for you to tell their point of view, and to also show that many fishermen are a part of trying to preserve the North Atlantic right whale.
Yeah. Too often fishermen have been cast as the villains in this story, and it's just not the case. You know, there are other perspectives in the fishing community, and I thought it was important to include that, not only because it's just a better representation of truth, of the reality, but also because if we want to solve this problem, we really need to work with fishermen. They're the ones who are on the water. They're the ones who are using the gear. They understand the challenges with adapting to a new ropeless system. And so we really need them involved in working with engineers to create new systems that work for them and reduce the risk for the whales. And so that's what Martin Noel has been doing. He's a crab fisherman in Shippagan. Many of his colleagues are doing the same. So I think there was at last count 20 fishermen in that region just within the Shippagan area that are using the ropeless gear and testing it and giving feedback to the engineering companies. And so they've started to use it to actually fish now in closed fishing zones. So the zones are closed for the safety of the whales, but this gear is, it reduces the risk so much that the idea is to introduce it not to replace entirely the fishing gear that they've been using, but to complement it in the season when the whales are present.
This film sheds light on statistics I didn't even know. About 85% of North Atlantic right whales will be entangled in their lifetimes. What was some of the sheer numbers that really struck you that you weren't aware of before?
Well, it is shocking when you think about that, 85%, and that's at least once. So many have been entangled more than that. You know, the whale that we filmed, number 4615, he doesn't have a name yet, but a 5-year-old male, he had been gear-free just 4 hours before we filmed that fresh entanglement. And the scientists who were with us on the boat, Moira Brown, Kim Davies, they've been doing this work for years. And they had never seen a fresh entanglement like that. Because usually when disentanglement teams come across the whales, they've been entangled for weeks, months. And so there's often just rope trailing because the traps that had been attached, the buoys have all been broken free. And you can see how violent the whale's reaction is at the moment it becomes entangled. You can imagine the stress. You know, there's a trap on the end of that line. It's weighted down. They're anchored to the bottom. They're mammals. They need to breathe. And so the reaction is violent and ferocious. It went on for hours. We filmed 4615, that young male thrashing at the surface. And back to your question, Vicki, it's 85%. Well, this whale's 5 years old. That was his second entanglement. So it's endemic problem. It's critical, and it's something that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Dr. Moira Brown. She factors heavily into the movie. She's really well known in Southwest New Brunswick. I'm video talking to you from St. Andrews, New Brunswick, so I'm also well acquainted with Captain Mac from the Campobello Whale Rescue Team and Nick Hawkins. Dr. Moira Brown will be joining me on the panel in Moncton on Sunday. You found some really significant people who play an important role in telling the stories of North Atlantic right whales. How did you come across, in particular, Dr. Brown and Nick Hawkins?
You can't do this story without without including someone like Dr. Moira Brown. She's been doing this for decades, and she's also worked in several different habitats. So she's worked with the New England Aquarium. She's worked with the Center for Coastal Studies. So she's had the opportunity to see these whales in many different habitats. And her knowledge is just, nobody compares to her level of knowledge about right whales. And so to be on board with her was really a privilege. And to see her reacting to that entangled whale, they did put a satellite buoy on. It was thrashing too violently to get anywhere near near the whale in a small boat. That would have been dangerous. As we know from past incidents with Joe that happened, Joe Howlett, I'm sure your viewers are aware of that as well. So it wasn't possible to attempt, to cut the rope, but they did put a satellite tag on. So yeah, Moira Brown, we couldn't have done it without her. And Nick Hawkins is somebody, he's a younger generation that's coming into this. I actually started the film with Nick. He was the first person that I filmed with. And he, as a photographer, he had done stories about the Campobello team. He knew Joe. It was very important for him to cover this story. And he had sought out special permission from the Department of Fisheries and Ocean to do that photographic work. And that's how I entered the story. That's how I started filming with right whales, which was with Nick. And they're so central to the story. It's what's happening here in Canada.
You show the comparisons in the film between the North Atlantic right whale and its southern counterpart, and there are some evolutionary differences, and one that maybe humans factor into quite heavily in where the North Atlantic right whale has evolved to. Can you speak a little bit to that for people who haven't seen the film, and why was that such an important difference to spotlight?
Yeah, so we interviewed Dr. Michael Moore, who's from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution down in Woods Hole. And he had done this study, was part of a study comparing these two species. They are different species, but they're very close, as you explained. And so the question was, why is the health of the southern right whale in such better condition than the North Atlantic right whale? And a lot of that has to do with environment. So it doesn't, that shoreline along Patagonia, where the southern right whales are, where a lot of the film footage was taken that you see in the film, it's not as urbanized. They don't have the same port activity. There's not as much shipping there, and fishing. There's not the fixed line fishing. So all of those things reduce stress, which allows for people to be people. They're like people, just like us, allows us to be healthier. When you have less stress in your life, the exertion that a whale undergoes when it's dragging around rope or heavy gear for months at a time, just the energy that takes, it impacts their ability to feed. So all of those things, lack of nourishment, exhaustion, the stress, all of these things reduce weight, which impacts the whale's ability to reproduce. And so that was really the scientific study that Michael Moore was doing, and that's why we put it in the film, because in a way we wanted people to imagine what the life of North Atlantic right whales could be if there was less interference from human activity. Mm-hmm.
You dedicate the film to 34 right whales that were killed during just the 4 years that you made this film. If there's something that changed that can be inspired by this film, some concrete change, be it inspiring more ropeless fishing or legislation changes, what would you like to see change?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we're having these panels, like the one you're moderating in Moncton. We're doing it across the country, and we want Canadians to become more aware of what's going on in the oceans. First, to introduce them to the North Atlantic right whale, because most of them will not have seen a right whale. So it's hard to protect something if you don't love it, and in order to have that connection, you really need to see it. And so that's the first step. And then by coming out to the theater, we'd like to engage them in a conversation. And so working with these organizations that I mentioned earlier, the Canadian Wildlife Federation. Sorry, did I mention that? I can't remember if I did or not. I've done so many interviews. But so the Canadian Wildlife Federation, the Canadian Whale Institute, IFAW, Sierra Club, Oceans North, working with all of those people. The idea is to engage citizens in what they can become involved in. So we've got an email campaign that we've started, where you can encourage Prime Minister Trudeau to continue the supports that they have in place, the protection measures, the speed restrictions, the support for fishermen trying to transition to less less invasive gear, or, you know, more whale-friendly gear. And so even small boats, because we say ship strikes, but we're talking about vessels of any size. 3 calves died in the time that we were filming because they were hit by small boats. And that's what happened with Snowcone's calf. And so if you're out on a small boat, either fishing or yachting, you know, you can impact the life of one of these whales. And so for people to be aware, to be able to look out for them, to know that going below 10 knots can make the difference between saving or killing a young whale. So that's what I'm hoping people take away.
The North Atlantic right whale here in New Brunswick is really special to people who live here. Is there anything an average person can do? What would you like to encourage just everyday people to do to better the future for the North Atlantic right whale?
1, be aware, come and see the movie, talk to people about it. You know, there's so many of our goods are shipped now. If you can buy more locally, you can potentially reduce that shipping. If you go on cruises, ask your cruise line about their policy toward, traveling in whale habitats and what they're doing to look out for whales, and if they're slowing their speed when there's a possibility of whales being in the area. And then, you know, support fishers and fishing communities that are looking to transition to less harmful gear.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today, Nadine, and thank you so much for making the film.
Thank you, Vicki. I really appreciate it.
That was Nadine Pequeneza, director of The Last of the Right Whales. The film will be screened in Moncton this weekend on World Whale Day. That's February 20th. I will be moderating a panel after the film, so I hope to see you there. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thanks for watching.